November 14, 1944, the Hürtgen Forest, a stretch of dense evergreens near the German-Belgian border, is cloaked in a cold, gray mist. The rain turns the ground into a thick slurry of mud and pine needles. Visibility is often less than 30 meters. The men of the U.S. 9th Infantry Division, exhausted and weary, move through the maze of trees where every sound could be a sniper's rifle or a collapsing tree struck by artillery. Among them are marksmen trained under a doctrine refined not by chance, but by legacy, a system that owes much to the lessons of Henry Norwest, the Metis sniper of the First World War. Though Norwest never fought in this war, his influence endures. His fieldcraft, invisibility, patience, and discipline has become the model for Allied sharpshooting instruction across Canada and the United States in 1942, at Camp Perry, Ohio, and again at Fort Benning, Georgia. U.S. Army instructors revisited Norwest's camouflage techniques, the use of terrain and vegetation not merely for cover, but as an extension of the shooter himself. This philosophy would become vital in Europe's forests, where machine guns and artillery could not always see or strike their targets. Now, in Hürtgen, it is put to the test. Private First Class Henry P. Hank Roper of the 28th Infantry Regiment lies motionless beneath a fallen pine, his Springfield M1903A4 rifle aligned with a narrow corridor between trees. He's not alone. Hundreds of snipers, scouts, and marksmen have been deployed to protect infantry movements from German observation posts and counterfire. The Germans are equally skilled. Veteran Jägers, huntsmen turned soldiers, employ their own camouflage and patience. But the Americans' training emphasizes observation over reaction. See without being seen, the instructors had drilled, a principle first codified by Canadian sniping manuals in 1918, directly inspired by Norwest's techniques and this environment. The sniper becomes the most valuable unseen ally. Allied units advancing toward the Siegfried Line, Germany's last major Western defensive wall, rely on these invisible marksmen to suppress observation towers, spot concealed machine gun nests, and guide advancing infantry through the woods. Each shot carries the weight of unseen struggle. Each pause, each breath held against the cold, is a continuation of a doctrine crafted by a man long gone but not forgotten, Henry Norwest, the invisible warrior whose precision and restraint shaped a generation. By November's end, the 9th and 28th Divisions suffer severe casualties, but their ability to locate hidden enemy positions prevents entire battalions from being ambushed in the dark woods. In after-action reports, officers note the decisive role of snipers in preventing further losses. The doctrine works, quiet, deliberate, invisible. Before the Hürtgen, before the Siegfried Line, there was the Western Front, 1917, the Battle of Vimy Ridge. It was here that Henry Louis Norwest, a Metis ranch hand from Fort Saskatchewan, Alberta, earned a reputation that would outlast the war itself. Serving with the 50th Battalion, Canadian Expeditionary Force, Norwest became one of the most effective snipers of the First World War, officially credited with 115 confirmed hits. His precision was matched only by his invisibility. Fellow soldiers recalled that he moved like smoke. There one moment, gone the next. His mastery of camouflage and patience was not just personal skill. It became institutional knowledge. After his death in August 1918 near Amiens, Canadian instructors documented Norwest's techniques in sniper manuals and post-war training programs. These materials, later shared with Allied forces, emphasized restraint, concealment, and observation elements that would directly influence British and American sniper doctrine by the early 1940s. When the U.S. Army established its sniper school at Camp Perry in 1942, many of the same ideas reappeared almost verbatim. Lessons from Canadian manuals were integrated, using optics to estimate range and wind through subtle visual cues, building firing hides with natural materials, and emphasizing the sniper as a psychological combatant whose unseen presence could immobilize entire enemy sectors. The British Army, already employing snipers since the Battle of El Alamein, passed similar methods through the 21st Army Group in Europe. By 1944, every U.S. infantry division advancing through France contained designated marksmen trained in the Canadian pattern, a curriculum based on calm endurance and environmental awareness rather than rate of fire. Norwest's influence, though rarely named in official U.S. documentation, was felt through the standardization of camouflage instruction films, including FM 23-10, U.S. Army sniping, which echoed his emphasis on patience and the art of remaining unseen. When these doctrines reached the European theater, they proved vital in terrain where visibility was often measured in meters, not miles. The sniper's role was no longer an isolated duel between two hidden shooters. It became a network of observation, eyes embedded within the forest, guiding movements, identifying threats, and enforcing control through silence. Even General Omar Bradley noted in his after-action briefings from late 1944 that fieldcraft and observation, not volume of fire, win ground in terrain like this. It was an acknowledgement of a philosophy born from the First World War's trenches and perfected in the forests of Europe a generation later. In the frozen stillness of Hürtgen, where artillery could not always see and radios often failed, the Allied sniper became both scout and shield, embodying the century-old wisdom of Henry Norwest, that invisibility, not aggression, was the true mark of mastery. December 1944. The Allied advance now presses against the formidable West Wall, known to the Allies as the Siegfried Line. Stretching from Cleve to the Swiss border, it's a labyrinth of concrete bunkers, anti-tank Dragon's Teeth, and concealed machine gun nests. The U.S. 1st and 9th Armies, spearheading the assault, face not only physical defenses but an enemy still fighting with precision and discipline. For the infantry, progress is slow. Visibility is limited by fog, snow, and the shattered remnants of forest and village. But the snipers, the invisible marksmen, find their element. Trained to wait, to watch, and to control movement with silence, they serve as both scouts and suppressors in one of the most difficult campaigns of the European War. Private First Class Ernest Tabor of the 9th Infantry Division later recalled in an interview recorded in 1983, "We couldn't always use artillery, the trees made it impossible. So they sent in the snipers to find where the shots came from, mark them, and direct us through. They were the first in and the last out." At the front near Stahlberg, the U.S. 3rd Armored Division coordinates with infantry units to dismantle bunker lines under sniper cover. Marksmen with Springfield M1903A4 rifles and M1C Garens occupy elevated ground near pillboxes, targeting German spotters and gunners through firing slits as engineers advance to plant charges German defenders. Members of the 275th and 353rd Infantry Divisions counter with their own sharpshooters, men equipped with the Carabiner 98K fitted with ZF-39 scopes. They've mastered the terrain too, often firing from reinforced positions inside collapsed bunkers or tree trunks hollowed by shell fire. It becomes a silent duel of patience, lasting hours or even days. But Allied sniper discipline, rooted in the calm endurance Norwest once demonstrated, begins to shift the balance. Their tactics aren't based on aggression but denial, denying the enemy the ability to observe, to aim, to breathe without fear. Reports from the U.S. 7 Corps intelligence summaries, December 1944, note that sniper teams disrupted enemy observation and delayed counterattacks by immobilizing forward command posts. One sniper pair could stall an entire company's movement for hours, not through open battle, but through the unseen threat of precision. By December 10th, as the 1st Infantry Division breaches the Siegfried defenses near Aachen, the importance of these marksmen becomes undeniable. Field commanders begin formally assigning snipers to reconnaissance patrols and defensive overwatch, a practice that would later be codified in post-war infantry doctrine. Even amid freezing rain and dwindling ammunition, their endurance mirrors that of Norwest's long days in the shell-scarred plains of 1918. Their success lies not in the number of shots fired, but in those not fired, the restraint that keeps them hidden and alive. The Siegfried Line, long thought impregnable, begins to bend. And behind every silent advance lies the same philosophy. The forest sees, the marksman watches, and victory belongs to the unseen. December 16, 1944. Before dawn, a low thunder rolls from the east. At first, U.S. units near the Siegfried Line think it's distant artillery. Then the radio reports arrive. The German counteroffensive has begun. It will become known as the Battle of the Bulge. The chaos that follows, the careful, deliberate work of Allied snipers becomes even more critical. The Hürtgen Forest and the Siegfried approaches transform overnight from offensive staging grounds into defensive strongholds. The Americans are now holding their ground against a sudden, ferocious push by the 5th Panzer Army and 7th Army. The terrain again becomes a weapon, dense, frozen, and nearly impenetrable. Many U.S. rifle companies are cut off from reinforcements. Supply lines falter, but the trained marksmen, accustomed to isolation and silence, adapt. They revert to the same survival-based tactics first honed by Norwest and his Canadian contemporaries decades earlier. Blend, observe, and Outwit in the 99th Infantry Division sector near Monshaw, sniper teams set up concealed observation posts overlooking roads where German armor attempts to advance. Using the M1903A4's 2.5x scope, they identify moving shapes at long range and radio coordinates to mortar and artillery crews. Their discipline keeps the enemy unaware of their exact positions. Sergeant Delbert Morgan, serving with the 4th Infantry Division, wrote in a letter home later archived by the National World War II Museum. "We lay still in the woods for hours. They came close enough to hear them talking, but they never saw us. It wasn't just shooting, it was watching, reporting, waiting. That's what saved us." These tactics, combining stealth with intelligence gathering, mirror the very doctrine born from Henry Norwest's example. The sniper's role transcends shooting. It becomes reconnaissance, communication, and psychological control. German units advancing through the forest are unnerved by what they cannot see. Commanders note in captured diaries and interrogation reports that American marksmen seem to appear and vanish in the trees, halting progress along entire stretches of the front as snow thickens and temperatures drop below freezing. Visibility falls to mere yards. Yet, from their camouflaged hides, Allied snipers maintain observation lines that artillery officers rely on. They're invisible sentinels guiding unseen hands. By late December, the German advance stalls outside Bastogne and north of Monshaw. While tanks and infantry fight in the open, in the forests behind them, it is the stillness that wins. A stillness kept by soldiers who mastered invisibility, discipline, and patience under the harshest conditions. Historians would later call the Hürtgen and Bulge campaigns among the most grueling of the war. But within those woods, the sniper's doctrine, Norwest's doctrine, quietly proved its worth. Each successful hold, each repelled advance, carried echoes of his enduring lessons. Remain unseen, remain calm, and let the environment become your ally. The tide was turning, not in bursts of noise, but in the quiet, unseen rhythm of watchful endurance. March 1945. The snow begins to thaw along the Rohr River. Allied forces, reorganized, refitted, and now driving east, are preparing for the final assault into Germany. The Siegfried Line, once a symbol of Nazi invulnerability, lies shattered in sections. Behind this achievement is not only the weight of artillery and armor, but the quiet precision of those who operated unseen. After-action reports from the U.S. First Army's intelligence section highlight a consistent finding. Observation and sniping proved decisive in identifying enemy strongpoints, correcting fire, and preventing counterattacks. By the time American units crossed the Rhine in March 1945, the doctrine of the invisible marksman has become formalized practice. Every regiment now trains designated sharpshooters for reconnaissance and overwatch, no longer an auxiliary skill, but a necessity of modern warfare. The influence of Henry Norwest's legacy is unmistakable. His methods, concealment, self-discipline, and patience had filtered through decades of military instruction, first in Canada's Dominion Rifle Association, then into British and American field manuals. What began as an individual soldier's instinctive artistry became codified military science. In 1945, at the infantry school in Fort Benning, returning veterans compile their notes and experiences into what would become FM 23-10 U.S. Army sniping. Within its pages appear echoes of the same values Norwest embodied: camouflage as psychology, silence as strength, and precision as the highest virtue of restraint. A generation later, the same fieldcraft would guide American snipers in Korea, Vietnam, and beyond, each inheriting not only the equipment but the philosophy of invisibility that traced back to a Meta scout crouched in the mud of Vimy Ridge. For those who fought through the Hürtgen and the Siegfried, The lesson was enduring. A sniper was never just a shooter. He was a protector, an observer, a silent presence that shaped battlefields without being seen. In post-war debriefings, veterans described their craft not as aggression, but as survival and precision, an art of balance between patience and decisiveness. Their restraint saved lives in their eyes, hidden among the trees, guided victory through terrain where machines faltered. The Siegfried line fell, but its collapse was not only a triumph of might. It was a triumph of method, of discipline, and of those who learned to fight by not being seen. In silence, they left their mark.